Hello, welcome to our Special Olympics Washington softball volunteer training. My name is Alex Ryder. I'm the Senior Manager of Volunteers here with Special Olympics Washington. Just wanted to give you guys a general breakdown of what to expect as a volunteer at softball. All right, so just going over the basics of softball. So our season runs from June until August. Our culminating state event is our state summer games held in Everett. And of course, between that time, we're going to have regional events that are Northwest, Southwest, and East region leading up to those state summer games. The events offered team competition slow pitch, unified team competition slow pitch, individual skills contest, T-ball, and coach pitch. So some volunteer fundamentals. So the main roles that volunteers do as a softball volunteer, scorekeeping is the big one. So that's just tracking outs, runs, just kind of the general flow of the game, and making sure batting order is correctly. We'll go over a few of those details here in a minute. Team escorts, this one's big at our state games. We have so many fields going on. It's important to have some volunteers essentially assigned to teams throughout the day, just making sure they're at the right place at the right time so we can keep everything right on track. Of course, umpires, we could not do this without you guys volunteering your time to do this. So we really appreciate it and thank you. A lot of you guys might be volunteering with individual skills. So we'll go through what exactly those different tasks are and what you might be doing as a fan there or as a volunteer there. And then finally, fans in the stands. That's always a big role at any of our events, but especially softball. It's great to have those uh, bleachers, stands nice and loud. So the more volunteers we can have in those roles would be great. Just kind of going over the general guidelines for softball. So our ball regulations are normal, just normal softball size. One thing to note, so for your umpires and scorekeepers, if you see it as well, is that batting helmets are required for all batters and base runners as well. The catcher must wear a face mask and a catcher's type of helmet. Chest protectors and throat guards are not required, but certainly recommended. One thing kind of to keep in mind, so if a play is made at first base on any batted ball and the batter runner touches only the fair portion, and if the defense appeals prior to the runner returning to first base, that batter runner is out. After the batter runner passes first base, they may return to either portion of the double base. So our first base, they have the two bases and may stand on either portion for the beginning of subsequent plays. Team sizes, so rosters contain a minimum of 11 and maximum of 15. You can also register 3 athletes as alternates. A team can start a game with 10 players, and of course, if there's an injury ejection, they can finish with 9. But on the flip side, games cannot begin with 9 players, and if this is the case, it would be a forfeit. So some general rules. Our games consist of 7 innings. A time limit of 1 hour and 5 minutes is enforced. Now, just to keep in mind, we'll make sure to let you guys know, depending on where you're at, exactly how much time it will be. Sometimes it's a little closer to an hour, depending on how quickly we're trying to get the games in. At this time, no new inning can begin after this limit. So if you're in the bottom of the 6th and you hit an hour and 5, you can still continue that bottom half of the inning. You cannot start a new one. A game will be deemed complete if a team has a 15-run lead after 4 innings or 12 runs after 5 innings. And in the case of inclement weather, 2 complete innings is considered a complete game. One thing to note, so a foul ball following 2 strikes is an out. So not like your Major League Baseball, something like that kind of rules. The batting order cannot change except for the following situations. So the first situation is the batter is out when playing shorthanded, and it is the dropped player's position in the batting order. The second one is if an athlete is ejected. If that happens, it will be considered an out when his or her time to bat arrives. The third situation, so a new athlete may be added to the bottom of the batting order at any time. Sliding is allowed, but definitely not recommended, and no assisted device is allowed during team play. Our tiebreaker rules, so starting at the top of the 8th inning, or if maybe it was a long game, the first inning after the time limit, and each half inning after that, the offensive team, they're going to begin its turn to bat with the player who is scheduled to bat last in the respective half of the inning being placed on second base. The player who is running can be substituted in accordance with the substitution rules. So pitching regulations, this is important to note for you umpires, also something for you scorekeepers to keep an eye on. The pitch starts when the pitcher makes any motion that is part of his or her windup after the required stop. The pitcher must deliver the ball toward home plate on the first forward swing of the pitching arm, past the hip with an underhand motion. That's the key part there, that it must be underhand. And the pivot foot must remain in contact with the pitcher's plate until the pitch ball leaves the hand. Batting, so the batting order must show the first and last name, uniform number, and position on the lineup card. So again, you scorekeepers, make sure it has all that information on it. If it doesn't, go ahead and ask the coach. And it must be delivered before the game by the manager or captain to the plate umpire, who again will work with our scorekeepers to make sure it's recorded accurately. In our unified game, the lineup card shall designate an A for athlete and a P for partner next to that player's information. And the batter must have both feet completely within the batter's box prior to the start of the pitch. They may touch the lines, but no part of their foot may be outside the lines prior to the pitch. So for you umpires, a ball is called by the umpire for each legally pitched ball. If it doesn't enter the strike zone, of course, if it touches the ground before reaching home plate, and finally, if it touches home plate at which the batter does not swing. So fielding, one thing to note, we do have the infield fly rule. That is in effect when there are less than 2 outs and there are runners on first and second, or the bases are loaded. The umpire will announce infield fly when one of the above conditions exists and a batter hits a pop fly in the infield. So players, so one thing to note, so we do have 10 players. So a pitcher, catcher, first baseman, second baseman, third baseman, shortstop. Then in the outfield, we have a left field, a left center field, a right fielder, and a right center fielder. So the inside the diamond, exactly the same, but outside we'll have 4 outfielders. Our unified softball rules, unified roster contains a proportionate number of athletes and partners. For you scorekeepers, the thing to note here is that the lineup should never exceed 5 athletes and 5 partners at a time. So if you end up seeing a mix of that, that's 7 to 3 or whatever it might be, make sure to let the coach know. And again, something to keep in mind is the batting order should alternate between athletes and partners. So some T-ball rules. So things in T-ball, so the bases can be modified from the standard distance. And same thing with the pitcher's rubber. Neutral zone will be marked in an arc of 45 feet from home plate. Any batted ball that does not cross this line is a foul ball. The coach's circle will be located 9 feet beyond second base. Each team must have 10 players to start a game. A batting tee is going to be placed directly on home plate. All defensive players must stand behind that neutral zone we talked about before the ball is hit. As soon as it is hit, though, they can come into the neutral zone to field it. If a batted ball does not leave the neutral zone and the defensive player does not touch it, the ball will be called a strike. If the defensive player goes and touches it, it is a live ball. If the batter has 2 strikes and fouls off the third, they will be declared out. The difference here in T-ball is that a regulation game consists of 6 innings, and the time limit here is 1 hour. So our individual skills, a lot of you guys are going to be helping out with individual skills. A couple different events that we have here. So event 1 is base running, which is to measure the athlete's base running ability. Bases are set up in a baseball diamond and positioned 65 feet apart. The athlete is instructed to start on home plate and run around the bases as fast as possible, touching each base en route. The time elapsed in seconds is subtracted from 300 to determine the point score. So you volunteers at this one, you're going to be tracking the time on a stopwatch and then marking it down on your sheet once it's subtracted from 300 to get the athlete's score at this station. Event number 2 is our throwing. So this is measuring the athlete's ability in throwing for distance and accuracy. So the player being tested stands behind the restraining line, back far enough to take 1 or more steps in preparation for throwing. Player has 2 trials to throw the softball as far and as straight down the line without stepping over the restraining line. So we'll have some volunteers out in the field tracking how far they threw it and how far off from the straight down the line, as well as some volunteers near the restraining line, making sure they didn't go over it. Event number 3 is our fielding, so measuring the athlete's fielding ability. The athlete will stand between two cones, which are placed 10 foot apart. The official, and in this case, it'll be a volunteer, will throw the ball on the ground to the athlete between the two cones. The throw here must hit the ground before the chalk mark, and that chalk mark will be 20 feet in front of you. The athlete may move aggressively towards the ball. Each athlete gets 5 fielding attempts per trial, and the athlete receives 2 trials. Our last event is our hitting. So this is measuring the athlete's ability to hit for distance when batting off a tee. So the athlete will stand in a regulation batting box and hit the ball off the tee. They receive 3 attempts. The score here, the distance of the longest hit is determined the final score. So the distance of the hit is measured from the batting tee to the point where the ball first touches the ground. So not the whole roll, but where it first hit. And it's measured to the nearest meter. So in this case, we'll have some volunteers out in the field actually watching to see where the ball first hits and then measuring that distance. Of course, our volunteer code of conduct. So as a Special Olympics volunteer, I agree that while serving as a volunteer, I will provide for the general welfare, health, and safety, dress and act in an appropriate manner, follow the established rules and guidelines, report any emergencies to the proper authorities, abstain from the consumption or use of all alcohol, tobacco, and illegal substances, and of course, not engage in any inappropriate contact or relationship with athletes, volunteers, or other participants. We just want to thank you guys for volunteering. We just wanted to give you a brief overview today of what to expect as a softball volunteer. Once you actually arrive on site, you'll get lots of in-depth training, get you all set up for your day of volunteering with us. Of course, we're still looking for volunteers at our events, whether it be region level or state games level. So be sure to check out our website at specialolympicswashington.org/volunteer to get signed up. Like I mentioned, hopefully we'll see you guys at our Northwest, Southwest, East regionals, and our state summer games up in Everett. If you do volunteer with us for confirmation of volunteer hours, you can email me at arider@sowa.org. We'll also have forms on site. And be sure to use that email if you have any general questions. Like I said, we'll get you all trained up with more details on site, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Just want to thank you guys again for volunteering with us. Can't wait to see you out there.